Hello and welcome to another episode of the Omics Cast. Today I'm going to talk about the Illumina PacBio acquisition. The acquisition of PacBio by Illumina was announced. The two companies had agreed. First of all, I'm going to discuss a little bit where are currently the different companies that intend to have any next-generation sequencing capabilities or products in the market, the current ones and the ones that are out there. I maintain this resource bit.ly/NNGSeq, where I compile information related to this. And so I thought it would be useful to share this information with people and describe where the current status is for this company. So in this chart, you can see the different companies that are in the space and how much money they have either raised or raised lately or in total, or they were valued at when they went IPO or acquisition. So at the bottom of the chart, you can see Illumina here, the $45 billion company. It surpassed the $44 billion mark recently. And it's a company that it raised about 100 million at IPO. And so it's a company that's turned into from a 100 million company into a $45 billion company. As you can see, this is in the log scale here. So if this is the reference and this is the number one market dominator for the 80 or 90% of the market, where are the other competitors? Well, here we got Oxford Nanopore, which has raised a total of over $500 million so far. And then 140 in 2018-19. And it's got a valuation approximately now, well, when they raised the last chunk of money of about $1.2, $1.5 billion. This always fluctuates, so it is difficult to say. And this was quite a while ago as well. So the company is apparently preparing for IPO, and in that IPO, they're probably going to be raising the valuation heavily. And then Pacific Biosciences, which is the company that is penciled to be acquired by Illumina. So if Illumina is at 45 billion, where is Pacific Biosciences given price or valuation for the acquisition? $1.2 billion, meaning it's a $1.2 billion company according to Illumina that is acquired by a $45 billion company. It's a company that has raised about 360 million so far. They're still not making money. They sell millions or hundreds of millions, close to hundreds of millions of dollars a year of product, but they're spending more than they sell, so they're not making money. But they have a very good technology that Illumina wants to acquire for $1.2 billion. So those are the three main players out there that are in the stock market. Then there is MGI, BGI, who is not in the list because it's privately owned by investors in China. And it's also a big company probably bigger than PacBio, maybe even bigger than Oxford Nanopore. It's difficult to say because we don't know much. All the other companies, Lasergen had their own line, and it was acquired. It was acquired by $105 million. Genapsys, which I made a video of as well, $84 million total raise so far. Omnium, Ion Torrent at the time, several years ago, raised about 60 million, and then they got acquired by 725 million. So even at the point of acquisition, even if you count for inflation, their acquisition was lower in the mark than the $1.2 billion acquisition of Pacific Biosciences. But it's probably the closest example out there of what now Illumina is doing to PacBio. Ion Torrent was acquired by what now is Thermo Fisher. Stratos Genomics, Quantapore, Roswell, Direct, Genomics, Tupor, guys, Quantum MDX, ReadCore, Centrillion, UST, NanoBio, and then X Genomes and Quantum SI. These companies don't even have numbers for money raised. And so this is the landscape so far in terms of the companies and the size that they have. And then the question is where does the acquisition stand in terms of the technology? So Illumina here is an short-read technology, very successful, and dominates 80-90% of the market. And it's based on their SBS technologies, synthesis, sequence by synthesis. It creates clones of the initial molecule in what they used to be called clusters. Not they are in wells in the pattern flow cells, and then it goes cycle by cycle, recreating the molecule and measuring it. They measure it by terminated bases in the process of synthesis. They synthesize with terminated bases, and then these have a luminescence that is optically detected. Oxford Nanopore and Pacific Biosciences, they both do single molecule and they both do continuous base by base readout, which causes problems in terms of data quality that need to be resolved by having more precise technology and software. Whereas Pacific Biosciences is a synthesis-based method, Oxford Nanopore is simply a pore, a nanopore that runs on ATP. Pacific Biosynthesis does native synthesis, and Oxford Nanopore doesn't do any synthesis. The only thing that happens to the DNA before it's passed through the pore is that it gets some adapter sequences, and that's it. And even though both Pacific Biosynthesis and Illumina use optical measurements, Oxford Nanopore uses electric currents, essentially sequencing by sensing through the nanopore. But as you can see, there's a lot of other technologies here that are similar in concept, right? MGI DNB-seq is a clonal cyclid synthesis terminated optical like Illumina SBS, and other technologies that are now phased out, like 454 or ABI Solid, had similar process. ABI Solid being one of the few that had a ligation-based method. So what do we get from this take? Pacific Biosciences and Illumina, they both have optical ways of measuring the sequencing, the DNA sequencing. So I'm going to talk about what Shawn Baker, genomic startup advisor, investor, and consultant, has written about the Illumina possible acquisition of PacBio. He's at sandiegomics.com, a nice website I encourage people to look. And in the past, he's been involved with Illumina for many years as a market manager, but before that, senior product manager, senior scientist in the microarray product development. And so he has a blog post, which is Illumina's acquisition of PacBio is a no-brainer for the legislators. And it's about 5 minutes after Illumina announced the intention to acquire by PacBio that he started getting phone calls from people to ask if it would pass the antitrust review. And then he says, he cannot say if it will, but he says that it should. And it argues why, right? And so he says that even though it's a case of a dominant DNA company acquiring a smaller competitor, one claim is that the competitor has a superior technology with imminent developments that will be cost competitive. And indeed, Pacific Biosciences is probably at the same level now as Oxford Nanopore in the long-read market, in that they can produce $1,000 genomes with some caveats. But if PacBio can make their technology better in the same at the same rate at which they've done it in the last 2 years, then in itself the technology is very interesting to acquire. And then a question is, if this is about market competition, the question is, do Illumina and PacBio address the same market? Is the market of short reads the same as the market as long reads? And is there a customer overlap? I think the reason why Shawn in his blog post says that there may be is because of the ability of PacBio to continue improving, and so moving into Illumina's market. And so he says, instead of asking if Illumina and PacBio markets overlap, I like to think about objections that customers and competitors may be making about it. And he says there's mainly three concerns. Pricing, current customers of PacBio and Illumina might get worried about prices. So if the two companies merge into one, then there may be fewer reasons for them to lower prices. But then he argues this is already happening, and it's already happening beyond these two companies. There's already pricing pressure from other sources like Oxford Nanopore and China's BGI, a subsidiary MGI. And then he says with Oxford Nanopore, particularly with the PromethION, they can already do a 30x $1,000 genome. And so there's already a lot of pressure, regardless of these two companies merging in terms of pricing. And then it says ONT generates really long reads. And while ONT's error rates have improved, they're still substantially higher than Illumina per se. So the comparison between Illumina and the Illumina PacBio merger and ONT maybe not be apples to apples, but it is with BGI MGI. He argues it's a much more apples to apples comparison. And so he says that a short reads-based system like the BGI system would be a global competitor when they go globally. Currently, they're in China and a few places in Australia. And they already advertise a $600 genome for a 30x human genome. At $600, it's very difficult to achieve with Illumina technology unless you are a sequencing factory and you can get discounts directly from Illumina. And so there's already pricing pressure on Illumina. In terms of support, PacBio's customer support apparently is very good. It's a wonderful technical support that customers receive. And while Illumina has a strong support team, they have a different reputation of not taking customer complaints too seriously. And so in that respect, Shawn, the author of this blog post, argues, how would this change if the two companies merge? And then in terms of availability, is that if Illumina acquires PacBio, is it simply because they want to mothball the platform and sort of get it out of the market? And he says that probably not be wise. And Oxford Nanopore might be happy if Illumina did this, but it wouldn't help Illumina at all, right? So then he quotes a tweet from, or makes a screenshot of a tweet of Clive Brown, the CTO of Oxford Nanopore, that says, "Oh dear, I read it more carefully. The technical rationale for this is already out of date, and the 8 million chip doesn't even compete with a MinION, never mind a PromethION. By the time this deal closes, this will be very apparent." So Clive Brown is already saying, we're not too worried about PacBio anyway. So from our point of view, we don't consider it a threat. And why would the regulators stop this merger? Who else could complain about this? Maybe Thermo Fisher. They acquired Ion Torrent and they have a small niche market there with cancer panels, but they aren't real competition. If they were real competition, it would be in favor of the acquisition. So in terms of the PacBio SQL platform, Shawn, the author of the blog post, says it can be considered a big success technologically, but the company is still not a commercial success. They're still not profitable. They still spend more money than they make. And so their options was to go out of business or get acquired by someone else, or continue raising money in the market, which they've done quite successfully. So if it's not Illumina, who else? Roche keeps acquiring technologies and then not liking them and not pursuing them. Thermo Fisher, Oxford Nanopore, apparently they don't seem to think too much of it. And so maybe some other large company who wants to buy their way into the sequencing space could be another acquirer rather than Illumina, like GE or Agilent. Agilent has started making moves, although they're a smaller company. They still rely on their microarray market to sustain themselves. Maybe BGI, MGI, but with the acquisition of Complete Genomics and now pressure in the patent war with Illumina, that they may not be interested in making things worse for themselves. So what could the regulators want to do or force Illumina to do? One is that the acquiring company divests part of itself, spans out another part. We could think of the array microarray business to be one of those spin-offs, but because that business in itself doesn't have big impact in the sequencing market, it wouldn't make a lot of sense. And so Shawn Baker, the author of this blog post, says that they should be able to allow the two companies to merge, and I particularly see interesting synergies between the two companies that hopefully will make the combination of the two technologies and what they can come up with it better. There's some people that argue that there's a patent war angle to it and that Illumina wants to accumulate some artillery when they go full on a patent war against Oxford Nanopore. I'm less concerned about that, but patent wars happen and there isn't much that we can do about it. But in any case, we'll see how this evolves. If you want to hear more about this, follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/Alberto. I'm happy for you to also contact me via LinkedIn, and I'll try and answer any questions you have. This slide deck is available upon request. Until the next episode, goodbye.